mark at the end of a sentence, Israeli academia raising the bar to an Ivy League standards question mark? I mean, it should be exclamation mark. We imagined ourselves to be there. We always think that the measurements and the quantitative research done on these issues are mistaken to put ourselves among the 150, 100, depends on the faculty. Taking it seriously, it is important to ask the question because numbers are not only figures. From time to time, they represent serious research. I remember myself talking to some of our professors that got some relative low marks when it had to do with teaching in classes. And the answer was, well, students hate me because I demand too much. I ask for too much. That's why I get the score of 60 to 70%. Well, it is a justification. Then I have to go to the ones who get the highest score, being in the highest echelons, and to ask them, how did you tempt your students to be in the highest echelons? Something is mistaken in the method. No. I mean, whenever you've got figures, you have to ask yourself, what happened to you? Where would you like to be vis-a-vis these measurements, vis-a-vis these calculations, vis-a-vis these criteria, and then to ask yourself, where am I on the world stage? It is necessary, it is important, because if we do believe that the only resource of the state of Israel is in between one's ears, namely the brain, i.e. that academia and research is the future of the state, maybe even the essential future of the state, I would even dare say the very existence of the future of the state, then we should deal with it in a very, very careful way. And it is not only for us to run to the government and say, give me more money. It will come. Towards the end of this session, we are going to hear Professor Trachtenberg, and he's the man with the resources, and we are going to bring to him each university's its expectations. But it is not about expectations. First and foremost, we have to expect from ourselves. First and foremost, we have to set the standards for ourselves. Before everything else, we have to delete the question mark and to replace it with an exclamation mark with taking ourselves to the lab of international research and work and to ask ourselves, where are we? Are we not having too many institutions of higher education, namely between 65 to 70 to a population of 7 million, more than half of kids, elderly people? Are we not spread too thin on too many topics? I mean, 10 departments of Egyptian studies, or maybe 5 departments of, let's take another topic, it could be international relations. How many of these do we need? Can't we take, I mean, nowadays from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, if you drive carefully, it's 45 minutes. Tel Aviv and Haifa, it's even easier if you've got a train. Tel Aviv, Beersheba also. Can't we reorganize our life? What's the meaning of reorganizing our lives in order to achieve not only saving of resources, in order to achieve the excellence? I'm not sure with regard to the answer. I am very sure about the questions. And this panel of people who live day and night the question of standards, the question of society of learners, scholars, students, professors, who know from their own experience what one can achieve in setting agenda and trying to achieve it, are going to answer these questions, each in 7 minutes. 4 of mine I already contributed to the panel, and then I see the audience. And I assure you, since some of you do not know who's the audience, that we are going to learn a lot also from the audience. We start with Professor Dr. Marlies Leegwater from the Netherlands. She's a PhD in biology. She's the head of Bologna Secretariat. And you know, Bologna's process enhances higher education in 46 European countries, and I have to admit, we are also heavily influenced by your decisions. So, the Secretariat for the period of 2007 and 2010 is provided by the Benelux countries, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and she is in charge. And yesterday I realized that some think that she is to blame. Please.
Prepared a presentation. Good afternoon. I hope it is visible. Not yet. See. Can someone make it visible? Yes, it is. And I'd like to start with saying that's an honor and a pleasure for me to be here, and I'd like to thank the organizers for the invitation. I was asked to give an input on rankings from the Bologna process perspective. And if you want to reach me, here are all the details. I am from the Netherlands, but I work in this secretariat visits provided by the 3 countries making the Benelux, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. I'm working in the Ministry of Education in the Netherlands and often in Brussels. But it is not the European Commission, it is the Secretariat of the Bologna process, being 4 people. So, rankings from the Bologna perspective. In doing so, I take you through the present transparency instruments of the European higher education area, which are at the system levels of higher education. Then I move to the wished transparency at the level of institutions, given also the diversity in higher education that is wished. The existence of league tables and the bias in the existing ones, and then the way forward as envisaged in the Bologna process and European Union, which could culminate in a multi-dimensional transparency tool. So far the outline. On to the European higher education area and the elements of which it consists. The European higher education area is this European 46 countries now of the Council that are party to the Council of Europe. 3 cycles have been defined in the Bologna process, and at national level, the option of a short cycle. The 3 cycles are usually called bachelor, master, and doctor. And the generic level descriptors for these 3 cycles are the points of reference, the anchor points, in the overarching qualification framework. European countries are in the process of making national qualification frameworks in which they relate the level of the national degrees, or the qualifications in general, to the reference levels of the European framework. Credit ranges for the various levels have been indicated in terms of European credit transfer system credits, 60 credits per year, and students receive a diploma supplement in which is described what they know and are able to do. And quality assurance is applied in all countries also to ensure proper implementation of the national qualification frameworks. The overarching frameworks first developed for higher education. You see that below, the greenish one, going from left to right. At a certain moment you enter the higher education system. And then you see the possibility of a short cycle linked to the first cycle, credit range typically 120 credits, 2 years. The first cycle of the bachelor, credits in general between 180 and 240. And the second cycle, the master, and the third cycle. There's no credit range for the third cycle, but the typical average duration is 4 years. And then after this was established in 2005, and ministers of education committed to it, and to show how the national degrees relate to this, the European Commission also made a qualification framework, but for the entire education system, from secondary education or primary education onward. And it was agreed that the 3 cycles of higher education in the short cycle equal the levels 5, 6, 7 and 8 of the European qualification frameworks for lifelong learning. So you may have heard of that, and that is why I explain it. In this way, levels of education are made transparent at the European level. But what information is available on the profiles of the various higher education institutions and the quality of their performance in particular fields? National information systems on this do exist in some countries, but do cross-border systems exist? Yes, there are worldwide league tables which provide rankings of institutions, and the best known are that of the Times Higher Education and the academic ranking of world universities of the Shanghai Jiao University. But rankings aggregate diverse indicators into a composite overall score by giving particular weights to the various single indicators, and the weights are arbitrary. There are no arguments for assessing particular weight to an indicator. The Times Higher Education ranking is for 40% based on opinions of academics, and which persons is not public. The Shanghai ranking is based on publicly available data, on Nobel Prize and field medals winners, articles published in Nature and Science, number of citations in certain fields, number of overall personnel. The Shanghai Index is 100% evidence-based. But what evidence is used? Which indicators are used, and how are they weighted? All existing rankings have a strong bias towards research orientation of universities. The research productivity and impact is measured. It concerns publications in scientific, internationally refereed journals which mainly concern sciences and biomedicine. How about indicators for teaching and learning, for taking students on board into a learning process? How about regional impact, impact on employment or innovation in industry? How about patents? What about the social dimension, equitable access and completion rates of students? Social inclusion is considered important in the Bologna process. The student body entering universities and completing programs should reflect the diversity in the population. A working group is established to propose indicators for this, and all countries participating in the Bologna process have committed to set targets for social inclusion to be reached by 2020. These important emancipating aspects of higher education are not taken into consideration by the present rankings. They don't do justice to the diversity of higher education institutions. Not only scientific research published in journals is important, also other aspects of education and research should be taken into account. Different users of rankings have different priorities and preferences, when comparing universities. Prospective students, employers, industries, or education institutions have heterogeneous preferences with regard to criteria for choosing a university of their preference. Therefore, the way forward taken by the Bologna process is providing transparency of the diversity. Universities are very diverse in nature. Their profile can vary from a full research university providing education at all levels in all fields and receiving lots of money for research, to a teacher training institute or an art college. This variation should be made transparent first, and then the performance of similar types of institutes can be rated. Providing transparency in diversity is done by what is called classification, named after the Carnegie classification of higher education institutions in use in the United States. A project has been executed in which European universities are classified according to what is thought, the level of knowledge areas, according to by who are studying there, and by institutional size and setting. Classification maps the diversity. Having established that mapping, a further rating could be developed for the performance. A project commissioned by the European Commission investigates if a multidimensional ranking can be done by a mapping of higher education institutions by a number of dimensions, then group the comparable institutions, then rate the performance of institutions that are comparable by a number of indicators. When these data are compiled in web-based tool, user themselves can select dimension which they consider important and then look at ratings of the institutions appearing in their selection. That is the conceptual approach of the pilot study for 2010 on the multidimensional global university ranking, and therefore the approach received the popular name Dual Multi-Rank. And to conclude, I'd like to emphasize that the social dimension is an important feature of the Bologna process and the European higher education area. It involves widening access for those with abilities and widening completion rates. The Bologna process is committed to develop indicators and set targets for the student body entering and finishing higher education to reflect the diversity of the population. In no way such aspects feature in the present rankings, but it is an asset to our societies and in line with the Bologna goals when those aspects are taken into account in a new multidimensional ranking tool.
Thank you, Professor Ligmutter. I think that the topics and some of the ideas that you presented may be of use whenever we start a discussion, and the presentation may be asked to be presented again. The second discussant is Professor Yossi Ben-Arzi of Israel. He's a professor at the University of Haifa, nowadays serves as a rector. And Professor Ben-Arzi, please.
Thank you very much. It's really a twofold background for this discussion. I'm very happy that you started with this ranking, because I intended to say right from the beginning that there are two really levels. One is the crisis in the Israeli academia and the higher education in Israel, and the virtual one, which is based on this popular, more or less popular ranking and tables of ranking which are being distributed once for a while. And if you study this ranking system deeply, you understand that, first of all, there is no chance for most of the universities in the world to be included in one of the, let's say, 500, because most of the components are, sometimes it's ridiculous, the components, numbers of Nobel Prize at your university. I don't know how many universities in Europe have the Nobel Prize, and how many universities in the whole United States have Nobel Prize laureates. So the problem is really not the ranking. The ranking is very popular, and sometimes it has some impact on this making decisions of the politicians or students or some other people. But really, in reality, the situation is quite different, and you mentioned it very well, because it doesn't take into consideration the variety of disciplines. Just for example, 22 of 24 journals which are being indicated in this Chinese ranking are all deals with nature, life sciences, engineering, though there are no social sciences, no humanities, and no arts and things like that. So let's put aside these tables of ranking, and maybe one more effect which is really relevant to the Israeli situation is, after all, now I'm talking to the Israeli audience here, and just to be relaxed on this point of view, that after all, and even Jerusalem went down a little bit this year, still, in the first 500 universities in the world, still there are the whole 7 universities in Israel. The whole 7 institutions of higher education in Israel are included in the first 500 out of a couple of thousands of universities which are being ranked. So the situation is not so bad as it's being reflected in this ranking, and this title of the discussion, the Ivy League or the international level, is really a very relative question, and we have to concentrate more and more on the Israeli agenda and the Israeli program. Because in reality, and in everyday life, and Professor Ben Sasson mentioned it right from the beginning, we are in a deep crisis in the situation of the higher education in Israel, and we have to acknowledge that, and we have to take into consideration that we have a huge challenges in front of us if we would like to keep the level of the Israeli science and the Israeli academia of nowadays, and if we would like to be regarded as one of the best academics in the world in the coming future. The crisis is due to a variety of reasons. I'm not going to take too much time in discussing the historical development of that, but let's remember that 15 years ago there were about 50% less students in the system that we have now. So we have now about 280,000 students in the whole academic higher education institution in Israel. Only 50% of them were about 15 years ago. There are a huge number of institutions, 66 according to the last publication, 66 institutions of higher education in Israel, 7 universities or research universities, and the rest are colleges, regional, private, and so on and so forth. The appearance of the colleges, creation, or let's say raising the flag of accessibility to higher education, was the main flag that was raised in the last decade by the Council of Higher Education and the PBC, the Planning and Budgeting Committee, which Professor Trachtenberg is now the head of that. And in the last 15 years, things went into a chaos in this system, and in this mixture of universities, colleges, and every college strives to be a university, and there are even some private institutions, which I have not mentioned here by name, but they believe that there are even better universities or better universities than most of the universities in Israel, because they don't put off the light at 4 o'clock at the universities, if you remember this quotation. So in practice, we do have a deep crisis. The dramatic cut in the budget of the higher education in Israel in the last 5-6 years, or before, let's say in the last decade, about net 20% of the budget, net 20% of the budget was cut. And let's just imagine such a cut in any other public institutions or public service in Israel, in the security system, the police, hospital, wealth, health, education, take any kind, or in the municipalities, net 20% less. It's really something that no system can survive. Just imagine that from tomorrow morning, in 2 or 3 years, 20% will be cut off the police budget, or from the hospital's budget. People will die. In higher education, nobody dies. Nobody feels it. Will die in the future somehow. There will be some death in spatial components of the higher education system in Israel, but nobody feels it in everyday life. So why don't cut anymore? And one more remark before I'm about to suggest some ideas about the future, is that we always were looking westward and looking at Europe and more toward the US. And Ivy League was mentioned here. So I always say that when comparing us to the United States, we are doing a lot of mistakes in our perception of the situation. We are not United States. We don't have two oceans on our side. We scarcely have the Sea of Galilee and the polluted Mediterranean. We don't have aircraft carriers. We don't have 300 million population. We are Israel. So let's think in Israeli terms. And on one more, the system in Israel is almost totally public system. Private institutions and private policy is not so popular as in the state. And some of the ideas and principles which guide the system, the academic system in Israel, is really bent to political, local, regional, and some other considerations. So don't try to take the benchmark of the United States. Even not some European countries, even though Europe is let's say, closer to or Israel is closer to the perception of the academia in Europe. In public system, you can't control, first of all, you don't control what you are doing in the States, of course, the tuition fee, for example. It is regulated by the government, which is bent to the pressure of the students. 280,000 students demonstrating in the streets are more important than some professors who are striving for a new lab. Of course. So you don't control the tuition fee. You don't control the salaries. As the president of the university, you have nothing to say. You can negotiate about it. But the real negotiator is Treasury. So everything is going to the Treasury. Everything is going to the public decision making. And this is why I think that there are three levels in which we have to work very hard in the future in order to, first of all, to preserve our situation in comparing us to other academics in the world, and secondly, to march toward a better future in our situation. And first and foremost is to create some other atmosphere among the decision makers, among politicians, and among the public itself, which I think the idea of academia or the image of professors in academia in Israel took a lot of damages in the last decades due to some other processes which are not mentioned here. We have to convince and we have to work on the mind of the decision makers that without excel and achievements and giving the academia to lead everything in Israel, there is a real risk to the very existence of the state of Israel. There is nothing more important, more than tanks and aircrafts and some other outer or other factor in the everyday life in Israel than the research and teaching in academia. Take every field in our life and you'll find the achievements of academia with its impacts on that. In education, in public service, in security, in technology, everything is coming back to the achievements of the Israeli academia. Think about it. And if you get this idea and you understand it, you understand that academia should be sometimes more important than investing in defense, in security, and some other thing. I know that it sounds a bit extreme, but this is reality. Without that, depressing academia, cutting academia, will lead to a dramatic misadvantage in the state, in the situation of the state of Israel at all. So that must be, I would say, the first challenge of the leaders of the higher education in Israel. And I'm looking right now, because I know this is the man who is going to do it in the future. First and foremost, the government should recognize and make a political decision that academia is let's say, almost a precondition to the very existence of the state of Israel. And then get to the money or get to the budget and to other. Don't fight for another $1 million shekel because you are going to waste it and to throw money after money without changing the situation itself, without changing the quality of the system itself. I would even dare say that having back this 20% into your pockets will make no change in the quality and in the development of higher education without other reformations and policy that you will have to adopt in the future. So the second condition and the second step should be, as Professor Ben-Sasson said, the responsibility of the leaders of the higher education to rethink academia in Israel and to think what happened after these 15 years of the chaos of universities and colleges and private institutions and everything. You have to make decisions between universities, research universities and colleges. And there will be 60 colleges or 61, that doesn't matter. It will be matter if 90% of the money of the PBC will go to research and to infrastructure in academia, means mainly in universities, or to raise one more the flag of accessibility. Accessibility is very popular. Accessibility is very cheap. Accessibility is very popular among politicians from every place and region in Israel. Yeah, I know. It sounds very problematic because it's going to politics. So the third circle will be, or the second one, should be taken among these people of the Council of Higher Education and the PBC. What is the nature of the system? Research, teaching, the balance, the allocation, and the division of the emissions of each system. And the third is among us, the academic faculty. There is a lot to do inside our system, and we have to admit it, that there are a lot of misadvantages in the system of the Israeli academia due to achievements of the unions, due to achievements of the unions of the professors, and there is almost impossible to do any change, any real change in the structure, in priorities, in differential policy toward developing this field or that field, or recruiting this scientist or that scientist, or to concentrate on this center of excellence or on the other. And some change should be done among us. So there are the level of the government and the level of the people who are responsible for the planning of higher education. Professor Trachtenberg, let me tell it in Hebrew. There are two letters in the committee that you are the chairman. Tichnun, planning, and Tiktzuv, budgeting. Budgeting is very, I wouldn't say very, but it's quite simple. Because budgeting is just to allocate. And you will allocate. I hope that you are going to change the models and to change things that will be more encouragement for other institutions to go for a better future for them. But allocating is a system. You have models of allocation, it's okay. But planning, the P of planning, we have missed this P in the last 15 years. And this is why we are at loss sometimes while questioning ourselves why there is this feeling of walking back in the status of academia and the higher education system in Israel. So the government, the leaders of or let's say the regulators, and we, the professors, have to do a mutual work in order to better the higher education system in Israel toward a better future. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Professor Gabriela Blum from Harvard Law School, scholar of international relations and law, and she's got a perspective of both here and there. Please, Professor Blum.
I'll speak. No, I'll speak from here if that's okay. Thank you. As Professor Ben-Sasson said, I do have the perspective of both here and that other country with the two oceans next to it. I was a student here, I was a student there, I was a teacher part-time here, and I am now a teacher there. I'm not an expert on budget. I come from a school with an enormous budget, just imaginary in Israeli terms. Before the crisis, Harvard Law School's budget, now it's gone down, but it had an endowment of $1.3 billion, Harvard Law School alone, not the university. So that's imaginary terms in the imaginary budget in Israeli terms, although I'm sure that Professor Trachman has been invested with so many responsibilities today, he will probably come up with a sum by the end of the panel. So I want to say, I want to focus instead on what struck me teaching law school students here and law school students in the United States, and what I think about as a major gap in Israeli education, which doesn't exist in Europe either, but in comparison with the United States, and that is liberal arts education. Liberal arts education in terms of some basic humanities, mathematics, science, and arts as compulsory and mandatory in any research university. I'm not talking about private colleges, professional colleges. Education in Israel has become a commodity. It's instrumental. You study for the sake of gaining something from it, not for the sake of gaining knowledge per se. And oddly enough, the Latin origins of the idea of the liberal arts education was intended to separate that education which befitted the free man from the education that befitted the slave. So the slave needed vocational training, professional training. The free man could enjoy the advantages of liberal arts education. And now we're raising a community of slaves, basically, who specialize in professional training, but not in the intellectual pursuit for its own sake. The American colleges, and here I used college in the liberal arts college sense, not the private schools, are intended to provide education in the broadest sense of the word. So yes, of course, there's substantive knowledge in various spheres, but it's also a place that allows young people to engage in self-searching, in growing up in an intellectual environment, one that encourages curiosity, trying different things, tasting different things, really trying to find out who you are, and coming of age. That's why you see all these American college movies on college kids. This is the process of growing up and coming of age. So it's about curiosity, it's about developing your preferences, it's about skills, it's about the skills to acquire knowledge and to produce it. There are certain learning skills that are taught and learned in college that are very lacking or absent from the professional schools. So the college offers you assistance in tailoring a program that suits your tastes and preferences and helps you and actually forces you to take courses in different disciplines, sort of opening up opportunities and knowledge that you didn't know existed or that you weren't familiar with or you never had real exposure to, and that helps you sort of form your own opinion. In addition to that, it offers a campus life. It offers a campus life where people are engaged in a community, they learn together, they create things together, they are involved in a social community outreach, in other programs, in running journals, in being engaged in community, social, political action writ large. And that also means they become more, I think, better citizens of their society later on. At the age of college, Israeli students go to the military. And the military, in many ways, is the opposite of college. It helps you mature in very important ways, but it also keeps you stuck in other important ways. So the military is not about free choice. It's not about finding your preferences, asking hard questions. Sure, there are things that, these elite intelligence or technological units of cutting edge, high tech, etc. But it's not, for the most part, it's not an intellectual enterprise per se. It's about authority, it's about discipline, it's about obedience. And then the self-searching part takes place in the traditional post-discharge trips to India, South America, and the Far East. This is where you do the growing up or the finding who you are after you left the military. What's also interesting about the military is that it's the collective, not the individual enterprise that is at the middle. So it's about the collective enterprise of the country. And after you've spent 3 years doing military service and then the rest of your life paying taxes, the last thing you want to hear about is any other type of collective service or community service when you're grown up. When Israeli students arrive at the university, they feel that they're behind. They're behind on time, they're behind on money, they don't get paid as soldiers. So they are looking for that type of education that would provide them, that would be something they could do something with, right? It's the degree that you could do something with. What type of degree would help me enter the employment market as quickly and as smoothly as possible? And you lose everything about the intellectual enterprise per se. The pursuit students are afraid to gamble. Who's going to learn classics or agriculture or linguistics if you don't know if you ever going to get a job in that? So you gamble on the safe, on law school, on accounting, on computers, on economics, etc. The campus is not a campus, it's a workplace from 9 to 5 at the best case scenario. Other than that, students work or engage in other enterprises but don't feel an integral part of the university. And all of that is coupled with a real sense of crisis, I think, in the humanities here in Israel, in the humanities education. The crisis in the humanities is not unique to Israel. I think it exists all over the world. But without a college system, without making some of these courses mandatory for the entire student body, it's impossible to salvage these departments. So you have 15 people registered for Hebrew literature in Jerusalem. This is the Hebrew University. In Jerusalem, you have 15 students taking Hebrew literature. If you want to learn classics in Israel, you have to study in 3 or 4 different universities just to make up the degree, because there are not enough courses in any single university. So my proposal, and just to say one other word, if anybody thinks that we can be excellent universities by having excellent law schools or economic departments, you're wrong. You cannot be Ivy League, you cannot be excellent without excellent humanities or sciences or arts. You can be adequate but not excellent. So a college system will keep the humanities going, it will keep the sciences going, it will open up opportunities, it will help students discover who they are, what they're really interested in, force them to some degree to try out different things that they're afraid to gamble on, that they're not familiar with, that are foreign to them today. Other people have said that before, I don't think it needs repeating. It makes better graduate students. People who went through college make for better graduate students. They make for better citizens. They become more informed citizens rather than ignorant. You can have a whole lot of ignorant professionals. That's not an oxymoron. They are professional in some fields, but they are ignorant in others. And you end up having an ignorant civic body of a population that doesn't ask questions, that just doesn't care, that it cannot be engaged in any real adequate way in public life. So my point is that if education is a value in and of itself that we do want to promote, the traditional arguments about resource constraints or military service or how will the labor market adjust need to be put aside, and we need to make this liberal arts education a priority. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Bloom. The fourth speaker, as you realize, he is the Minister of Higher Education in Israel. His budget is 10 times of our university, is 2 times of a moderate ministry in Israel, is equal to some of the main ministries in Israel. He is Professor Manuel Trachtenberg, Professor of Economics, Tel Aviv University. He is now the Director General of Planning and Budgeting Committee of the Council for Higher Education. I have to admit, we served together for 3 years, very educational years, on 2 sides of the stage. He represented the government, I represented the House, and we found a very common language on the basis of scientific experience that we both had. Professor Trachtenberg, please.
Good afternoon. As you realized from the previous speakers, I have a very easy job. You just open your wallet, and that's it. But before I go into what I want to say, Gabi, I want to say I agree with every word you said. And in fact, your concerns about liberal arts education in Israel are very much in my mind. I'm not going to talk about that today. You did a very good job at that. But it's something that should be addressed and will be addressed. And Menachem, I'm not bringing resources to the table, surely not today, but let me tell you that I'm bringing resourcefulness to the table. And that's an asset that it's worth at least as much as resources. So the question you put to us, Menachem, is can we, meaning the academia in Israel, be up to the standards of the highest institutions in the world? And let me answer with the echo of January 2009, yes, we can. And I say that free and loudly, yes, we can. And moreover, we don't have an alternative, so it will happen. And I say that with being fully aware of what that means. And I'm not running for election. Why do I believe that? Because we have the potential, the demonstrated potential. How do I know that? Excuse me, Gabi, I'm going to point at you. You know how many Gabis are there in the United States and some in Europe? About 1,200. Over 1,000 Israelis, perhaps not as brilliant as you, Gabi, but thereabout. That's an enormous resource, unprecedented in terms of percentage of the resources we have in this country. We have something like 4,500 faculty at the universities, not at the colleges, okay? 25% on top of that are abroad, young, having gotten an education at the best universities in the US, and most of them, and there is a research about that, they teach in the 40 top institutions in the US. If we manage to bring back in the next 5 years, and we are working on a plan for that, if we manage to bring back half of them, perhaps that's very pretentious, it is, but that's our future. Then we will have done the first and most important step towards bringing the higher education system to where it should be. Because, when I say should, because we have proven that we can produce the talent that is elsewhere now. But, she is a product of our system. Okay, so we can produce it, we have to bring it back, that can happen. So that's the reason I'm optimistic. The other thing that the other reason I'm optimistic is because we have here the tradition of a research and academic excellence. That's something that cannot be taken for granted. Most institutions in the world of higher education don't have that tradition. You can put up a university in no time. The buildings, the faculty, the students, the budget, but to have the tradition, and that takes so many facets within the university, with the promotion system, etc., etc. It's like, when you go to Oxford, and I'm sure that many of you have done that, and you visit the place, you tour the place, and you take a guided tour, and the guide shows you this and that, and then, there's always a tourist that asks, tell me, how come that you have such a fantastic grass here, so well kept? And so they tell you, no problem, you plow the land, and you plant the seeds, and then you wait for 800 years and you have that. Meaning, you have to keep it up for a long time to cultivate that tradition. We have that still. So the talent, the potential, the tradition are there. We have the potential, but we are not there now. And we are just emerging from a decade-long crisis that some of people described here before me. And I won't go again through reciting all the symptoms of that crisis that are really appalling for us in terms of, the decline in the rankings, the number of students per faculty, the aging of the faculty. That's, in my view, perhaps the worst and most worrisome symptom. Because, the productivity curve is very clear. It peaks in different sciences at different times, but not when you have as much gray hair on your head. So that's very clear. So yes, we are there emerging from a crisis. What should we do about it, aside from complaining in every opportunity? I don't like to complain. We have to take responsibility in our hands. For too long, Israeli academia played the role of the victim, kind of the battered wife, going and begging for handouts, and doing that, and I'm fully aware of what I'm about to say, doing that with arrogance. That doesn't go. It doesn't work. That's not the way to have a standing in society and in the political arena. That's not the way to ask for more resources. That yes, we need more resources, and I will come back to that. But that's just one of the factors that you need in order to have an institution as we need it. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we are going to put our house in order. I don't have the moral stand to ask anything from anybody if my house is not in order. And my house, our house, is not in order. I said that we are going to. No, we already started. And for those of you that are following the developments, a few weeks ago we signed an agreement ensuring transparency. You spoke about transparency. Transparency takes many facets. And if we get public money, as we do, we need to be transparent to the public. Where does that money go to? And after years of arguing, with the treasurer, that we are going to have transparency. Second requirement is we need to have a dialogue and a cooperation within our house between all the parties to the system, the faculty, the unions, the universities, the colleges, the institutional head of, and so forth and so on. There was a rift, there was constant bickering and fighting, infighting, and so forth and so on. We demonstrated that we can do it. A week ago, we achieved an agreement with the unions, with the faculty union, so that they are ready to essentially renounce to some of their salary in exchange for a matching from the government, and all that will go to the institutions. And Menachem, the president of the Hebrew University, was the first to sign an agreement a few days ago, and I congratulate you for that, because it's really a precedent. That's the way we should act. We have to take responsibility to our fate and not just ask for others to save us. So things are happening, and more of it is coming. I'm happy to report to you that this Sunday, at the cabinet meeting, the government, I was asked to present, it was the opening of the academic year, this Sunday, and I was asked to make a presentation about the state of Israeli universities and so forth. After a long negotiation, I was allocated 15 minutes. It's not bad. And it started at 10 in the morning, and the discussion of all this ended at 1 in the afternoon. 3 hours of discussion in the government, purely about the future, and not because there was some strike or some crisis and so forth, so the government had to take action. No, it was discussing the big issues that lay ahead us for academia. I think that that's also unprecedented. I can tell you, for 3 years I sat in the government. We never had a discussion like that before. We had discussions about the higher education system, but always confrontation. always. So something is changing. The system is ripe for a change. You know, there is an expectation out there that indeed we will do it. And I'm telling you, we are going to do it. Now, it's hard. There are issues ahead of us that are the legacy of the past. Take the pension system. I'm not going to go into the details, but you know, we have an enormous indebtedness because of the pension system, and we have to come to an accord, solve it. We are going to do it. You know, the fact that it's complex and difficult doesn't mean that you cannot tackle it. We have to tackle it, and the sooner the better. So we have to clear up the road, the path from these legacy issues and march forward. We need a new budgeting model. The budget is not just a system of distributing money. The budget is first and foremost a way to incentivize what you want to incentivize. Academic excellence, research excellency, teaching excellency, and so forth and so on. And you can do it. We will need to use some of the indicators that you were referring to before. I mean, these indicators are not just in order to provide a ranking. I mean, those indicators, in my view, should be a way to link them to budgeting and therefore incentivize what you want to incentivize. Okay, so that's one of the things we're going to do. We want to develop, create academic centers of excellency and link to that the program to bring back talent and brain from abroad. Okay, so we don't want to bring back people so that they will be distributed thinly and randomly across institutions just because this or that institution happen to know this or that guy. We want to concentrate, to have a critical mass in academia, in research, not in all disciplines. In many of them, you need a critical mass. There are externalities, there are economies of scale to that. You know, somebody said, I think you said that the D of planning is missing. Yes, literally, there was no, by the way, there was no director of planning at our institution, but that's a detail. Sorry? Sure. So anyway, but I don't like planning in the Stalinist sense. I like planning, which means, first of all, policy setting criteria, and having an incentive systems that lead the institutions towards those objectives that you set up in your policy. Anyway, I could go on and on and on. I don't want to do it because I'm going to be hit by the chairman here. But let me tell you that I'm extremely optimistic about the possibilities of doing that. I know we can. There's a new generation of presidents at the helm of the universities, and they are more or less of the same mind, and the politicians are willing to listen, among other things, because we don't appear as beggars to their door. So let's do it.
To the Foki of this discussion, and one can have many more. Still, I recommend, and everybody takes his own goal, please guys, that we refer to main paths that were dealt with. The one has to do with the inner situation, namely, what do we do at home in order to achieve? The other one has to do with the outside force. Are we going to participate in the world game? And that's the question, why and how. So one is how to fix, and the other one is towards what are we going. And in between, I think that you've got all the last 4 presentations without asking questions from each other. So instead of having another round of the speakers, I'd ask the audience either to put themes or questions in a short way, in a very short way, in order to enable all who want to talk. Please, and introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. for Gadi Weinstein, and some of the panel know me. I did 5 postdocs in Israel, 2 in the University of Jerusalem, 3 in the University of Haifa, and I cannot find a job in Israel for almost 3 years. And I asked,
talking about the students and about a better tomorrow for the students, and you were on and on about how to better their future and how to, I don't know, manufacturing better students in Israel. And well, I was starting to feel a little, well, how do you say, אני אגיד בעברית ותתרגמו את זה מקסימום. הרגשתי קצת סוג של התנסות, כי באמת אני מרגישה שהדרך היותר טובה אולי לעבוד זה עם הסטודנטים. כי באמת אני מרגישה שמחר יותר טוב יכול להתחיל מהיום. אני סטודנטית ואני אשמח שתבואו אליי ותציעו לי את התוכנית הזאת ואני אעשה אותה איתכם בכיף. Why not to start tomorrow from today with the students? We can do it with the budgets, but with the students too.
Thank you. Those with the mics, please be generous to your neighbors, and Mr. Kruger, by the time you know how to operate the microphone, I'll say a word to you about you. Does it work? Please? Can you stand?
Does it work?
I'll tell you why I ask you to stand, because some of us do not know that there are people abroad who are caring very much about the Israeli education, and they are not sitting here, but their heart is here. Please. You lost your voice.
That's what it is.
Start with the nice ones. We are patient to hear the others also.
Thank you. Do I have to ask a question? Because I would like to comment on some of the things. For those of you who don't know me, that's most of you, I am a graduate of Columbia College and Columbia Law School, so I know something about American education. And I was chairman of the Hebrew University for 9 years, and I'm an active supporter of the Hebrew University, Tel Aviv University, and of not Haifa University. I apologize for the other universities, so that I know something about education in this country. And I'd like to comment on a few of the things that were said and then ask a question by making a proposal which has already been made. First, I'm sorry, can you hear me at all? I'll scream. I don't understand why we think Ivy League is such a great standard. And with all respect to Harvard and to Columbia, professors don't teach, graduate students teach. At least at Hebrew University, and I think at many of them so. In many cases, I have children, and they're learning from graduate students. And when I was at Columbia, most of my courses were taught to me by graduate students, not by the professors. And my colleagues, because I'm also a lawyer, as well as an investment banker, at Harvard and at Yale and at Princeton were also taught by graduate students. So if I hit a nerve, Professor Bloom, I apologize because maybe I'm wrong now about Harvard, but not based on information that I have. The point is this. I don't know that Ivy League is the best or the necessary standard. I think you have to develop, as the professor said, your own standards. And they don't have to be external standards. And we don't have to be emotional to understand why the universities are the most important asset of this country. It is the only natural resource that Israel has. And forgetting about emotion and thinking in pure business terms, one of the ways that Israel is going to make its place, because its local markets are small, is by continuing its high education and teaching its students. You have great students in this country. There's no question about the quality of the people who can matriculate at the research universities. The issue is whether or not you can keep them once they graduate. Now, it was mentioned by, I think, Professor Trachtenberg, that you now have over 1,200 teachers, Israeli teachers, in the United States, and that his goal is that within 5 years, you'll bring back at least some of them or all of them. And I think that's wonderful. My concern is that unless the system changes, because our problem here is systemic, they're not going to come. Instead of having 1,200 in 5 years coming back, you're going to have 2,400 in the United States because they're better paid and there are better incentives. And part of the problem here is that you have a system which does not permit professors to be paid what they're worth. All professors get paid the same regardless of how much they teach, even perhaps regardless of whether they teach. And that's a big, big problem in incenting people to come back to this country to teach. Secondly, and these are just a few statistics that I've learned at the Hebrew University, there are 7, as you heard, 7 research universities in this country. There are a total of 66 institutions. In the United States, there's 1 research to every 3 million people, 1 research university to every 3 million people. In Europe, I don't know about Professor, I don't know about your secretariat, but in Europe generally, there's 1 research university to every 2,225,000 people. In Israel, there is 1 research university, there are 7 research universities rather, for roughly 7 million people. Think about that. Now, I'm not suggesting you should close any of the universities. I think that would be politically foolish. But I do have a suggestion, and that is, and sir, with all respect, many of the things you talked about probably belong in the purview of the universities and not in your purview, in the sense that yours is the Planning and Grants Committee for all the universities. The universities themselves, and here I agree with something that was said, have to stop complaining. They have got to look to themselves, work with themselves to eliminate redundancies, to make greater efficiencies, and also, and I don't know whether or not you were referring to the Erasmus system in Europe, where a student can matriculate at Tel Aviv University and study at Haifa University. It's essential in this country. It's essential. Does anybody here besides some of us know how many law schools there are now in this country? 30. 30 law schools. 5 of the...
How many lawyers have we got? 52,000.
52,000 lawyers.
Yes.
So you need,
That's the last count.
so you need a lot more. Yeah, right. Business schools, how many business schools or equivalents, government supported? In excess of 20. None of those business schools, and here I'm going to say something very silly, is any good. There are grades between them, but one great Ivy League...
Mr. Kruger, the problem is that you stand there, and I cannot control you. I mean, after 20 minutes I have to stop you.
Cut me off. I apologize. Look, there is a way to handle this, and it's not necessarily money. If the universities could get to, we've talked about this, I know you from my predecessor did. If we talk about having the universities get together voluntarily and talk about creating a more effective, more efficient system, and if then Professor Trachtenberg comes in and provides the way to do it, you could have a successful, viable, non-depreciating university system in this country, and you don't have it now. Also, think about the Erasmus system, because it will help. 1 great business school is all you need. Okay?
Thank you. We've got 13 minutes, and I'm going to share it with you. Namely, you are going to have 7, and I'm going to have, we are going to have 7, and we end up 1 minute late or 2 minutes late. Who has the mic in his hands has more power than the others. Yes, Mr. Brown. turn your face to the public, please.
Is this on?
Yes, yes. Go ahead.
I'm speaking to you from the very bottom end of the university level. But I'm speaking because I'm hearing about the loss of our researchers and our World Trade University people to other countries. And I want to talk about the gain that could be made to the university from a country where there's such a lot of anti-Semitism at the moment that our young potential students are not going to get into universities there. I don't know whether I should mention the name of the country, but I am very well connected with it. As an Israeli, I'm not of the country. But I've been trying to put it to the university that we should look at these young people there and bring them in. They've had a good education till now, an extremely good education, although the standard of the education of that particular country is going down very quickly. And that's why I suggest to the university that very quickly we tackle the problem of young people who are available to come to the university here. And when I've made certain suggestions of how it should be done, there's a lack of funding to do it. And this is what I think is very important to deal with.
Thank you. Who's got the mic in his hands? Her hands? Please.
Hi, my name is Maureen. I'm originally from Switzerland. I work at Tel Aviv University now, and I just created a master's degree in conflict resolution, international one. And I think that what's lacking here is the whole topic of international programs in Israel, where we created a program in English. We brought 40 students from all over the world, excellent students, and we see so many opportunities for Israeli universities to bring students from abroad to do research, to study, to bring money also into the country, because these students are ready to pay much more money. They bring a different level. They meet Israeli students and bring a lot of motivation to the Israeli students. They discover our country through this also, and we can also pass them on messages. We can do business with them. It's an amazing opportunity, and I think that teaching in English is very important. It's also a way to have exchange programs. When you talk about Erasmus, I was in Erasmus, and I know how good it is if you can have exchanges. Now, we cannot have exchanges with other universities because we only offer programs in Hebrew, and therefore we send students abroad, but we cannot take them back. And we might lose collaborations with other universities because of that.
Thank you. Will you give the mic to the woman in front of you, please? Who has? Yes, please, go ahead. Yes, please.
Okay, I have a different perspective here because I graduated high school a few months ago, and after I was released from the army, I got to university. And I have a conflict. On one side, I want to stay in Israel and learn in Israel. However, I have the ability to learn in the States, and Professor Bloom said very good things about the American university. I know what's going on in American university. And I'm raising the question, why young Israeli, as a representative of the next generation of Israeli scientists that won international science competition, should stay in Israel besides Zionism?
Thank you. Please.
My name is Sarah Strunz. I'm the rector of the Hebrew University, and I would like first of all to applaud Professor Bloom for the wonderful presentation of liberal arts system which he presented. And so as not to agree only with you, I would also like to agree with the girl who spoke before, Hen, who said listen to the students. And this is where I depart from what Professor Bloom said. I think that we have an image of what the students want, what the Israeli students want, which is built on the way they take, and maybe they take the way because this is the way we show them. We opened this year at the Hebrew University a beginning of a liberal arts program which we built as something that eventually will be compulsory for all students. And the response of the students was amazing. We have classes that can hold all the students that registered. I think that maybe we should listen to what the students ask and help them develop it in another way than what we are doing.
Thank you. Where's the mic, please?
I am Avi Berman from the Technion, and I want to apologize for our president. He had to be in the States because, unfortunately, not all of our money comes from for that. So this report that you have already
Just a footnote. Fortunately enough, it doesn't come from.
There is an important report written in the Neyman Foundation that you're familiar with, and I'm sure that it will help you in doing what you are doing. I have an answer for Yadid, and I think the answer, the reason for a brilliant Israeli who won Science Prize, and the reason for him to study in Israel and to stay in Israel is the same reason that brilliant Israelis in Ivy League universities should come back to Israel. And actually I want to ask Gabi, why should brilliant Israelis come to Israel?
Well, we have now 7 minutes in between us, and I'm going to take my show that I was giving up at the beginning. So Professor Trachtenberg, you may. Yes, in a short way, to whatever you want. That's the advantage you can pick up at the moment. Then you see them downstairs, and you have to fight for yourself. I'm not going to protect you.
First of all, let me say thank you, because essentially these are not questions but really opinions and or ideas, and we need those opinions and those ideas, and they correspond pretty much with what I think at least should be done. There were some specific questions. Your name is Gali? Yeah. Yeah. And well, I don't know the details of your plight, but it sounds familiar. And essentially, that's related to the crisis we went through. That in the course of that crisis, we lost slots. So there are less slots today than there were 7 years ago. So you are essentially suffering from that. And I don't know how fast, but there's going to be a reversal of that, and we will make sure that happens.
It was 1 minute. We have to be very serious about it.
Okay.
That's it?
So, no. Let me give a couple of observations on what Harvey said clearly strikes a chord. And I'm going to say a couple of things. One about differential pay. Okay, yes, we are going to do it. I mean, this is one of the areas that I pushed for at the Shochar committee, and now that I think we have a little bit more of influence on things, this is right down our alley, and it's going to happen. And the faculty that fought us bitterly against that is proving to be more responsible and cooperative. So, this is a big yes. Mobility of students, Erasmus and all that, absolutely. I mean, it's completely ridiculous that in such a small country, my students in economics couldn't take a course at the Hebrew University. And it just drives you crazy.
Okay, we changed it.
Yeah, I know, but that was true until 2 years ago. So all that is a big now I want to tell the young student there about the... Yeah, you're not a student?
No, I'm the director of the program.
Okay, you used to be a student. You look like a student, okay. You talk like a student, you must be a student. International, the idea that we are pushing is to set up in a competitive way international graduate programs in English. And that will go a long way also to answer your concerns about who does the teaching. In order to have graduate students to do the teaching, you need graduate students in the American sense, meaning that they are engaged in a 4 years or 5 years program to go straight to the PhD, not the MA like we have here, and then we will see. Okay? We cannot continue like that. I mean, in Israel there is not a single program, a graduate program in that sense that is okay. Well, sorry. Anyway, so that's something that kind of figures very highly in my agenda. And one last word. There was somebody that asked, so why should I stay here? I think the student over there. Yeah. You said, why should I study here? Why should I stay here? And there are two parts to the answer. One is you say just because of Zionism, but let me tell you that's not a small thing. That's not a small thing. Okay, and you know, I came to this country when I was 16 years old because of that. And the love of the country, you know, what it's called Zionism or something else. The urge to raise your kids here, because this is your family in the wider sense, your roots and so forth. That's a great thing that we have in this country, but it's not enough. And the rest we have to provide, and we will provide it.
Now I discovered another point, sub-point. We're also negative. Professor Leadwater, please. I trust that you keep the time that we do not have.
Well, thank you for providing me this opportunity and some insight, views in your education. Well, I believe in structural relations between universities. Choose your university of preference, have structural relations, ensure that students can move between those universities without losing credits or time, and probably compromise for language. I could give the example of the Netherlands, where it is obligatory by law to teach in Dutch, unless there are reasons not to do that. And reasons not to do that are in graduate programs with a lot of foreigners, and we think that mobility and foreigners are needed for a quality program.
One word about the languages, although it wasn't a question that was addressed to me. First of all, some schools already do that. They invite visitors to teach in other languages, mostly Americans or Europeans who teach in English. It all makes sense to offer more visitors, more classes in English, more programs in English. I wouldn't want to see Israeli universities lose the Hebrew. I think it's part of the culture. This is the Jewish culture, no less than, if you think about Judaism as a culture and include the Hebrew language, it has to be part and parcel of higher education in Israel. We shouldn't be moving completely to a foreign language curriculum. Personal choices. Where to live, where to study is a personal choice. I don't preach to other people what to do with their lives. It sounds like you have the options of joining the academic reserves now. I went to the academic reserves. I went to Tel Aviv University. I served for 6 years in the military. I then did a stint with the National Security Council. It was all personal choices. I don't, there are, and Mr. Parker said, you know, there are a lot of considerations here. Salary is one, an intellectual environment is another, research opportunities is a third. People were especially good or original or make specific contributions in your field. All of that is not going to change over a day. The sequencing of inviting people to come back, you also need to think about what changes before you invite people to come back, and the sequencing of this process needs to be considered. We heard one person was very adamant about staying here and raising their children. You may choose something else. I wish you the best of luck in any choice you make and a happy life.
Two points that might be related. One is for the international programs. No doubt that Israel universities should strive for enhance this aspect in their everyday life. International programs are very important to attract foreign teachers and foreign students, and that will contribute also to this ranking system that you mentioned before. But it's more important because it brings more competition to the situation, and it brings more characteristics of an international atmosphere at the universities. And I must say that according to our experience, we have at the University of Haifa a couple of programs which are being taught totally in English for students from Arab countries, from Palestinians who might come from the Palestinian Authority, and for students from China, and sometimes, of course, for students from the States or from Europe. And these are the most successful programs that we do have. And there are other systems of working that in every department and in every faculty, there will be courses that will be taught in English, so to attract foreign students, we will come with the aid of the Erasmus, and we are included, by the way, also in the Erasmus Mundus program right from this year. So this international aspect of the university brings a lot, but it stands, first of all, in contrast to the mission of being a university, not Hebrew university, but a university, a Hebrew university in Israel, and the language, which is, of course, dominating language is Hebrew. And the other point is the point of the students, because there is an antagonism. Here I come to Chen, which left the room, but left us with a lot of frustrating, because we don't take into consideration the interests of the students. Yes, the students are protesting sometimes against this direction of internationalization of the university and teaching in English. They said we pay in order to study in Hebrew, so don't force us to study in English. So we have to find a way how to enhance the international character of the university and to leave the students living okay with that. But the students, and she mentioned this program, and Professor Stromza mentioned it once more in 1 minute to say, the students has a lot to do in the crisis, in the situation of the crisis in the higher education in Israel. They opposed dramatically, and they protested, and they convinced politicians not to raise their tuition fee, or maybe even to cancel. Okay, I'm quite a socialist in contrast to other maybe people in this room. I think that there should be no tuition fee at universities in Israel, but there is no chance for that. So the question is how much to pay. And I suggest the student union to demand, to agree to raise the tuition fee, but to demand from the universities to take all this surplus of money to invest it in infrastructure for the students themselves, for better teaching, for more teachers, for better labs, for better computation systems, and so on and so forth. And they said, well, this is not a proper political way. We are about to be politicians in the future. We don't care about the quality of teaching.
Twice we took the time, so now we stop.
Yeah, we stop with this frustrating point.
The moderator can have before this session is ended. First of all, why do we have to have, or we think that we have to have the best army? Because we do not have any choice. Why do we have to strive to be the best in academia? Because we do not have a choice. We are not going to have any chance in getting back scholars who study here, never mind if it is 1,200 or 100, but the best of us could find haven abroad, and we want them there. Do we have any chance to have our students, when they finish their studies, to stay with us? Do we have any chance of developing the needs of the society, educational needs, engineering needs, medical needs, security needs of this region, without having the best of research? Do we have any chance of getting research funds from NIH, from European Union, from other sources, if we are not going to try to be the best? So instead of asking why we couldn't achieve what haven't been achieved, we have to set the goal as we thought at the beginning, namely to be, or at least to try to be the best. And in order to achieve it, to change the structure, in order to achieve it, to change administrative borders and limits. And that's exactly, I think, in terms of priorities, must be the first priority in our lives, in our university, and I believe that we all will find the needs of each university according to this very basic value. It's for me an honor to thank those of the university who were involved heavily with making of this conference. 3 days loaded with parallel sessions, each of them interesting, full of important presentations, alert audience, and I'm not going, and I haven't used the podium when I had it yesterday, to thank them by name. So I would like to thank Professor Stephen Kaplan, who remind if you saw interesting things academically, it has to do with his personal involvement. I would like to thank Mr. Chaim Mizrahi, who is the Director General of the University. You do not have to complain, but if you want to complain about some organization shorthand, but others were of his achievement. I would like to thank Director of the University, Professor Sarah Sturza, Vice President, Mr. Karmi Gilon, and last but not least, universities are in the basic of everything done in the state of Israel. Please